Hi, Joe Smiles, Uncensored Natty Pro. I help overweight and obese people lose fat permanently. Are low-fat foods making you fatter if you eat them? Do they generally help you lose fat? Let's find out. So there's a few definitions that we must clear up but when it comes to low-fat foods, meals and diets. The definition of a low-fat food is if it provides 3 grams or less of fat per 100 calories. Common examples include vegetables, fruits, whole grain cereals, egg whites, turkey breast, chicken breast without the skin, beans, lentils, peas, seafood and low-fat dairy options. The definition of a low-fat meal is when the product is reduced in fat by at least 50%, or for the foods they have less than 50% of calories coming from fat. Also, the low-fat or the light products is either reduced in calories by at least 1/3 or reduced in fat by at least 50%, often with salt reduced by 50% also. So what's the definition of a low-fat diet? Well, on a low-fat diet, it would be classed as consuming 30% or less of total energy of calories from fat. For instance, in terms of calories, that would be from 50 grams of fat, you would be consuming 1,500 calories per day, or 70 grams of fat if you're consuming 2,000 calories per day. Occasionally, low-fat foods can contain the same amount of calories as high-fat foods or dishes because the manufacturers have added so much sugar that the calories from the sugar make up the calories from the removed fat. However, it's often hard to replace the full fat calories with sugar calories, as the sugar only has 4 calories per gram and fat has over double at the calories of 9 calories per gram of fat. And 9 times out of 10, when you consume a low-fat version of anything, it's likely going to be lower in calories, and therefore it will help you to lose fat by helping you to reduce the overall calorie intake. However, you still need to check that the calories you're consuming from a meal are low in calories versus the full fat version of the same meal. Also, you want to make sure that even though the meal or food item is by law lower in fat, it's still low enough in unhealthy fats for you to not gain fat. Okay, let's talk about satiety and misinterpretation of labels. Dietary fat plays a role in promoting feelings of fullness and satiety. So low-fat foods may be less satisfying, which could lead to you to consume larger portions and seek additional snacks to feel satisfied. That can happen. Overeating in this manner can contribute to calorie excess and fat gain. Also, believe it or not, satiety is more psychological than physiological. For example, you're more influenced on what makes you satiated based on your past experience with certain foods, what you like, by advertising, labeling and beliefs about what you think is satiating and what isn't. When it comes to misinterpretation of food labels, some people have a habit of thinking that they can eat more of a lower calorie or lower fat meal. They do this because they misrepresent low fat labels as an invitation to eat more of a particular food, assuming it's inherently healthier or lower in calorie density. But this perception can lead to an overconsumption, and it goes against the whole purpose of the low-fat meal, which is to help you consume fewer calories and therefore less fat. So what do the studies say? Well, don't just take my word for it and stop listening to and believing doctors and social media influencers. My advice is to be careful who you let influence you in life, because a lot of people in life lie, and you'll probably be worse off if you listen to liars. So have a critical mind and a healthy skepticism, and let's look at study 1, 2012. They looked at all the randomized control trials on the relationship between total fat intake and body weight in kids and adults. It was found that high quality, consistent evidence showing that low fat intake leads to a small but significant reductions in body weight from 6 months to over 8 years. Okay, let's look at study 2, 2021. They questioned the theoretical model that many people are led to believe that carbohydrates lead to excessive insulin secretion and therefore promoting fat gain. This is called the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity. They randomized people to eat as much plant-based low-fat food with 10% fat versus as much animal-based ketogenic low-fat diet with 70% 6% fat, and they wanted to do this for 2 weeks and then swap them around to the other diet. Participants were kept in a hospital ward, so they were monitored 24 hours a day, and they had to stick to the diet. So this is the best possible research that can be done on nutrition and dieting. It was found that energy intake during the low-fat diet was spontaneously reduced by around 500 to 700 calories per day compared to the low-fat diet, with participants losing weight and body fat while reporting no significant differences in hunger, fullness, pleasantness of the meals and satisfaction. This shows that the carbohydrate insulin model of obesity is not consistent with research. Now let's look at study 3, 2016, which compared sugar content in low-fat versus regular versions of food. It was the first study to question the lay media, press media, and the lay person, suggesting that low-fat versions of food contain more sugar and therefore equaling more fat gain. They found that there was more sugar, although not a lot, in the low-fat foods compared to their regular version, but the low-fat foods had less calories. And you must realize that it's the additional calories in the full fat foods which can make you fatter, and nothing to do with some magical ingredient in the molecular components of sugar. So stop listening to doctors and influencers that tell you that sugar is fattening. I live off liquid sugar and I don't eat any food whatsoever, and my body fat has always been lower than 10%. And lastly, now let's look at study 4, 2020. Back to comparing low carb and low fat diets, this systematic review also found that analysing randomised control trials, there was no evidence that people on a low carb or no carb diets lose any more weight than people on a low fat diets. Now bear in mind, this is when analysing almost 3,500 people not in a hospital ward, so it's worth knowing that most people never stick to extreme diets 100% of the time. So can you really say that anyone is on a low or no carb diet or a low fat diet if they're not doing it 100% of the time? Probably not. That's why they're not sustainable. Should you avoid low fat foods and meals? The simple answer is, and the general answer is no. This reason being is because low-fat foods must pass the regulations of the Food and Drug Administration, so by law they must be lower in fat by a certain percentage to their full fat counterparts, and therefore they're more likely to be lower in total calories per food item or the meal or the diet. Also, no, low-fat foods or low-fat meals aren't making you fatter. You've got to stop thinking like everyone else, which is thinking that individual food items or meals are making you fat. That's bullshit spread by doctors and influencers that don't know what they're talking about. It's the amount of energy you put inside you, like inside a box, and it's the amount of energy that you can take out of the box. And this either makes you fatter or leaner. Bear in mind that a low-fat product can still be high in calories and fat. For example, a lower fat mayonnaise may contain 30% or 50% less fat than a standard version, but it's still high in fat in terms of the grams per serving. Also remember, your brain plays tricks on you and your satiety, and your perception of fullness is entirely almost psychological. So if you convince yourself that you're consuming less calories by eating low-fat foods or low-fat meals or on a low-fat diet, you may be prone to overeat because you can think you can get away with more food as you're consuming less overall calories from the low-fat versions of the foods and meals. So be careful how your mind works. And finally, the overwhelming majority of low-fat foods and low-fat meals can certainly be part of a healthy diet when consumed in moderation. Also, low-fat foods generally have more fiber and water content, which takes longer to digest and are healthier. Like and subscribe and have a good day. And in the meantime, YouTube suggests you watch this video, so check it out.